Big shiny red button.
Hello everyone and welcome to this new edition of Men at Arms. This is Remlace from 40k Theories.
Hi, this is Fiaura, and I'm back from England!
And today we're going to be looking at the weapons and armour of the Eldar. So, we'll kick this list off with looking at the standard equipment worn by Eldar Guardians, mesh armour. Now, mesh armour is formed from tens of thousands of individual pieces of thermoplast interwoven to produce a dense material resembling reptilian scales or chainmail, which becomes momentarily rigid when hit, spreading the force out across a large area, thereby reducing the damage. It also disperses heat rapidly, giving reasonable protection against energy-based weaponry. And it's psychically sensitive, automatically reacting to the wearer's movements and thoughts to maintain a glove-type fit as they move and fight. And it contains additional features such as including an independent air supply and heat-sensing lenses on the helmet.
Okay, so mesh armor sounds like graphene. For those who don't know what graphene is a complex set of polarized carbon material layered together that currently is in the experimental phases. Graphene is known to stop 1 gram micro bullets made of solid gold traveling at 6,900 miles per hour. To illustrate this, I have to convert it to meters per second and convert it to kilograms in order to determine that the graphene is repelling 31 newtons of force on a microscopic scale. When scaled up to 1,000 times, for purposes of resisting impact, which would be the equivalent impact force of a modern-day bullet, graphene would be repelling 31,000 newtons of force, or roughly 3 metric tons of direct impact. Taking this into account and taking into account exactly how Eldar mesh armor sounds, how it looks on a smaller scale, and also how it apparently performs in the field, minus the psychically sensitive part of it fitting like a glove, it pretty much acts like graphene. There is a problem, however. Graphene only stops the bullet. It doesn't disperse any of the impact. So while it would be effective versus, say, las guns, bullets, bolters, and the explosions from said things, the impact force from bullets and the actual bolt round itself hitting the wearer would result in a significant amount of internal body damage. It's similar to how when you're shot with a bullet and you're wearing a Kevlar vest underneath, there's still a very big bruise under you and all the wind is knocked out of you. It's because the impact force still transfers into you. It just doesn't penetrate your skin. Very useful against penetration, not that great against impact, and considering the prevalence of melee weapons in the 40k universe, mesh armor is going to do you absolutely no good against hammers, maces, and power fists. Or swords.
But compared to the other armor we've looked at so far, how does this one stack up?
It's pretty good at stopping, it would in theory be pretty good at stopping actual bullets. It's not, however, going to be any good for you when stopping, a guardsman with a chainsword hitting you.
Then perhaps the next set of armor might. Next set of armor we're looking at is the Aspect armor. Now, Aspect armor is manufactured by the Eldar for the use by their specialist Aspect warriors, which uses psychic engineering to construct psychosensitive material, which reacts instantly to the movement by the wearer and molds and reshapes itself to provide a tight fit. It stiffens on impact much like mesh armor and includes further rigid plating to reinforce it even further. Now, there's a heavier variant of this worn by Dark Reapers, Shining Spears, Striking Scorpions, Warp Spurs, and Fire Dragons, and there's a lighter variant used by Dire Avengers, Howling Banshees, and Swooping Hawks to provide extra maneuverability, but not as much dense protection compared to the heavier variant. It contains thick armoured plates but retains great flexibility.
Now, I'm going to say this now. Eldar fanboys, hold off all of your rage and hate at me until the end of the second part of this, because I promise you, there are good things the Eldar do. Aspect armor is total garbage. The idea of shifting a plated armor around the user while it is being worn results in not only weak points being changed and exposed almost seemingly at random, because the user is going to move and not actually probably know where they're going to get shot. Furthermore, since the plates are shifting around and, quote, stiffening on impact, that means there is no superstructure underneath the armor for which it is bolted to. Example, Kevlar vests have rifle plating in them. You can take the rifle plate in and out, but at the end of the day, the rifle plate is secured into the vest. Since this is shifting all around the armor, it is securing at whatever point it happens to be suited at for the additional rigid plating. This means that the additional rigid plating probably not only is not in the right place, but the angle at which the bullet hits and therefore ricochets somewhere else is not going to be controlled by the user. And furthermore, what was not a weakness in the armor 2 seconds ago might be a weakness now because the user's body position has changed drastically. It's never a good idea to gamble with your body armor, trust me. RNG on your body armor is not a good idea.
No. No, starting so well with the mesh armor.
They were, and then they had a terrible bout of silliness.
Well, the next thing we got on the list is not so much armor, it's more a, disruption tactic, I suppose. It's the Eldar Hollow Suit, which is used by Eldar Harlequins. Now, each suit contains a programmable hollow field, which breaks up the outline of the wearer as they move. Whenever they move, their outline explodes in a flash of light, and when they stop moving, the image reconstitutes itself. But when they stop moving, the outline blends into the surrounding landscape, making them very hard to fight in close combat, easily disorienting their enemies.
So, the concept of this armor works on 2 types of camouflage principles. The first one is blending and breaking up the outline. This is primarily how just about every camouflage we've ever designed actually works. This is why we've gone from the kind of puddle type of images you see on camouflage from the 1980s to the digital camo you see today, because it does an incredibly good job of breaking up the outline of the wearer. With the broken up outline, even though you could be looking straight at someone, it becomes impossible for our brains to recognize that as a human being because we don't see the shapes and architecture that would be involved in a humanoid figure. So therefore, our brains don't register it as a threat. Using this type of material, this is kind of the evolution to having an electronic version of digital camo. Now, the other concept they use is when they suddenly start moving, they go a bright flash of light. This is what is referred to as a light shield. Light shielding happens when you overload a person's eyes with light, preventing them from seeing what is beyond the light. You will notice this when the sun shines very brightly and you can't see out your window till you get very close to it. Another example is when you look at a car with its lights on, you can't actually make out anything going on inside the cabin from directly in front of it. That is a light shield. There's so much light hitting your eyes that your eyes condense in order to be able to see the area the light is hitting, but they can't see the darkened area beyond because your eyes are not letting in enough light to illuminate it for your visual spectrum.
So in essence, it's kind of like if someone took a flashbang grenade and turned it into a set of pajamas.
Yep, exactly. It is like a scaled down version of a flash grenade turned into a set of pajamas. Which is why it's incredibly disorienting by Harlequins. This would make them incredibly difficult to hit, yes, and I can understand why they are hard to hit. However, they lose this advantage as soon as the surprise and pre-combat is over. Camouflage only works so long as you are not actively engaging your opponent, whether you're using the light shield method or the breaking up of your pattern method. So it's great for surprise. However, considering that it uses the same mesh armor and Harlequins are mostly close quarters, I imagine quite a few Harlequins bleed to death internally.
But I can't imagine this actually being really useful for guerrilla warfare.
Oh, it would be great for guerrilla warfare, but then again, don't get hit because a sword striking your arm is likely to, while it won't penetrate your arm, it's likely to break it.
Fair enough. So, next up we have the signature weaponry of the Eldar, shuriken weaponry. Now, shuriken weaponry comes in 3 main types, shuriken pistol, catapult, and cannon. Now, shuriken weapons fire razor-sharp monomolecular discs capable of slicing through flesh and penetrating a considerable thickness of plasteel armor. Now, with the standard shuriken catapult, there's a second variation called the Avenger, which has an extended barrel power feeds and inbuilt rangefinders, resulting in greater range and accuracy, and fully automatic, the Avenger can fire 1,500 rounds per minute, although at that rate it will deplete its ammunition core in just 4 seconds. The Shuriken cannon is essentially a big heavy machine gun that shoots ninja stars. It features an elongated ammunition coil, a triple accelerator field, and stabilizing gyroscopes. Although they are generally mounted on Guardian heavy weapon platforms and Eldar vehicles, they have been known to be wielded by Harlequin Death Jesters as a single-person weapon.
Okay. Now for all the Eldar fanboys to hate me. When you think of a shuriken pistol, it sounds awesome because you get these images of ninja and samurai throwing shurikens at each other. However, to point this out, shurikens in real life are never meant to be lethal. They're meant to be annoying, semi-threatening, but it's almost non-existent for someone to actually kill someone with a shuriken. It doesn't happen. It simply doesn't have any armor penetration, it doesn't have very good range, and it doesn't exactly fly straight past about 10 meters. Now, we've ramped up the velocity and turned it into a bullet. For the purposes of most bullets, bullets are meant to be small, aerodynamic, and have a penetration-style tip to minimize the area of impact to maximize the chances of penetrating the target, or the target's cover and or body armor. The shuriken spreads out the impact, allowing for a large area of the body armor to disperse the shot and therefore provide even more efficient protection from regular body armor. Furthermore, it has very little penetrative quality for actually punching through someone's cover. So, don't even expect these at point-blank range to go through a wooden door and kill someone on the other side. They'll get stuck in the wood.
How much force would a shuriken weapon need to actually send one of these monomolecular discs through several inches of class steel armor?
You would need to ramp the speed of these things up to the point that they can't, because once you get to 3,200 meters per second with a shuriken of this shape and size, more of the force would be transferred into the shuriken than the object it's striking, meaning the shuriken would shatter before it penetrates.
Essentially what happens, like when you spin a CD if you ramp up the speed on a CD player to like a maximum, it will just cause the CD to just shatter.
Exactly. The shuriken won't be able to hold itself together, and when it hits the plasteel armor, yes, it will damage the armor, but the shuriken will shatter before penetrating, because you have to remember, equal and opposite force means that this is why when you punch someone with your fists, you bruise your knuckles. Now we're going to ramp this up for the shuriken catapulted cannon purposes. Ramping up the size does not compensate for the drawback of firing a shuriken. Actually, the catapult rifle's larger caliber means that it actually penetrates less armor, because it's a larger, again, it spreads out the impact even more than the pistol. And also comes into problems of hitting air resistance at extremely short ranges. Even slight gusts of wind can throw it off course. Because the bigger the bullet is, and this is a very non-aerodynamic bullet, the less straight it actually flies. When I actually saw a picture of an Eldar shuriken and measured its angles for determining how it flies through atmosphere, it has the same atmospheric aerodynamic qualities as a Viking throwing axe. It effectively has the same air resistance coefficient and air resistance moniker for determining how well it travels through the air. While an axe is very lethal at close range, it quickly drops to the ground, loses speed at an extremely fast rate, and is extremely susceptible to wind, especially high velocity air, especially when it gets up to higher velocity, because the air becomes more dense, and the more dense the air you're passing through is, the more it'll blow you off course. This is why, like airplanes, slight gusts of wind at 10 miles an hour cause turbulence, because you're traveling at 500 miles an hour through the air, and therefore effectively the front of the airplane is running into about 3 or 4 times atmosphere for purposes of determining how much force is being applied to the front of the airplane.
So we've pretty much determined that the shuriken is pretty much useless against armor. How good is it against bare flesh?
I'm getting there. So, against bare flesh, the shuriken would embed itself into the flesh. It would not actually break bone, however. because upon impact, its force would literally decelerate it so quickly because of the large impact area that it would pierce through muscle and fat and possibly organs, but if it struck a bone, it would stop cold. Furthermore,
cartilage?
Cartilage, it would be able to cut through up to roughly a ½ inch of cartilage based upon the figures the Game Workshop provide us before it would actually stop, meaning it could cut about halfway through your elbow. Furthermore, is accuracy problems. Shurikens are not accurate at long range. Neither are 12-gauge shotgun slugs. But let's go with the weight and size and dimensions of a shuriken. The rough estimation that I come to at a wind speed of 0, meaning the air is not actually being moved, firing through normal Earth atmosphere, the shuriken from the catapult would have from the, i.e. the rifled version, would have a deviation of 3.7 meters per 100 meters traveled. To illustrate just how inaccurate this is, a 12-gauge shotgun slug only has a deviation of 1.1 meters per 100 meters traveled, and a shotgun slug doesn't come out of a rifled barrel. For those who don't know what deviation means, deviation is used to determine a gun's accuracy. In short, you take whatever the deviation is, and that is how far away from the point you aimed your shot that the weapon will be off course when it arrives at the target. Basically, if you were to take a shuriken cannon and aim it at a bullseye 100 meters in the distance, on average, the round would land 3.7 meters away from the target. Which also means that at 10 meters, it would land 0.37 meters, or roughly 1.5 feet off of course, just 10 meters away from you. To illustrate how short 10 meters is, your average driveway is 10 meters. In the United States.
So is this actually more or less accurate than the bolt gun?
Significantly less accurate, because then we get into the shuriken cannon. And this is the part where I had to check my math 3 times and then died laughing. The shuriken cannon is the worst of all of these for three reasons. 1, it fires a larger projectile. 2, it generates a significantly larger amount of recoil. And 3, it fires the projectile at a much slower rate, meaning it's even more susceptible to the air around it. The shuriken cannon has an estimated deviation of 9.47 meters per 100 meters traveled. Or, to put this in short, nearly 1 meter off for every 10 meters it goes.
And so essentially a distance that's not going to hit a damn thing, is it?
Based upon real-world numbers and figures and based upon looking at the actual gun's ammunition, dimensions, and weight, no, it's not going to hit a broadside of a barn. To illustrate just how inaccurate this is, a 155mm howitzer fired from an M60A1 Paladin for artillery bombardment purposes only has a deviation of 4.8 meters per 1 kilometer traveled.